let's talk about Tailwind. So we now have the ability to do static files. And I want to use Tailwind CSS, because it's awesome. So I'm not going into why Tailwind is so awesome. I think it's just a really powerful, flexible tool that lets me work in HTML. That's a short version. Just trust me that it's pretty great. John, your comment on versioning and the package in PyProject TOML, I'm not really sure. I'm not doing any version. So Heroku itself does versioning of our deployments. I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but I don't think I have to do any specific versioning of the app. Maybe you're thinking of something else. So we need to get Tailwind integrated and usable, and it's going to require some changes to the way that we run the site locally, and also, well, it's going to require some changes. So here's our getting started thing, and we can do this pretty basic setup with Tailwind here. And I think this will also get to the static directory that we didn't have, static dirs, that we left commented out because of the warning. So here's how I want this to flow. When we want to serve, so we saw our base CSS example from the admin site earlier, right? And the way that worked was the admin site had its own static directory, and then the collect static would put that static file into the final output directory. Similarly, we're going to have our CSS file for the site. I'll probably even call it base. It'll just be at a different path. And the base CSS for the whole Journey Inbox site needs to live somewhere. So we will put that base CSS file into, well, how did I do this? I think because there's a staging here where the base CSS is going to be generated by a Tailwind build process here. And then that's going to go into static files and then be collected. Yeah, I think that was the pattern. I need to refer back to homeschool. This will probably be clearer if I just look over there. So I think what I did, I called this front end. Yeah. All right. And then I called it site CSS. There's probably a bunch of stuff that we can steal from this. We're going to need a couple of configuration files, and then we're going to need to install some actual tools. Let's go do those things. And then we need to also, sorry, y'all, still got a tickle in my throat. I guess I'm not fully over my cold from last week. We're going to need to update the build process on Heroku. Heroku is optimized to work on one language at a time. And it does that with these notions of a build pack. And the build pack is optimized for a particular programming language. We can go to this deploy job and we can see that it's running on this stack. And then here we go. It says using Heroku, the Heroku Python build pack. And that's because I told it to use the build pack. Or it might have been detected the first time it ran because it detected a requirements file. Tailwind is not a Python project. It is a Node.js project here. So we will need to be able to install Tailwind and then also have a build pack for Node.js. So if you think about the flow of how the build is going to go, I think I just mentioned a minute ago that we need to build the CSS file first. And then once the CSS file is placed in a place where Django can have it in the collect static directory, it'll just get slurped up in that process. So it's like build the JavaScript, the CSS, then do the Python stuff to actually collect it. So that's going to be the sequence of our build packs in the actual build job. And I think in order to make this work, we need a couple of things. Yeah. So here's where one of the aspects of Heroku that I'm not wild about is that these multi-language things end up like they all expect files in certain places, and you can have the Python one in here by having requirements.txt at the top. But if you want to have a JavaScript version, you need to have the package.json at the top. So we can't hide the package.json into a subdirectory. It needs to be at the top in order for the detection stuff to work. That's kind of annoying, but that's the nature of it. So here is this version of it. And we'll probably take some updates, and we need to scan through the dependencies that we actually require. I don't know that how many of these are still needed or even recommended by Tailwind. So, and then we also have to, oh geez, do I even have npm installed? I might not have it on this machine. I do, okay. 9.5, that sounds old. Node. What is the npm, current npm? Or maybe I'm thinking of the Node.js version. Okay, never mind. That's a reasonable number. So the JavaScript ecosystem is wild, y'all. Node numbers are much higher than npm numbers, and I can never keep track of which is which. So first step here is to actually install Tailwind CSS, just like it says. And the -d means it's going to be a developer dependency, which is kind of indicating that if you're actually doing a JavaScript project that you wanted a separate executable or a separate set of, it's not executable is not the right term because it doesn't get bundled that way. Then you have a regular dependency section and a developer dependency section. And the developer dependencies don't get included with in a lot of the other bundling stuff. Are you running 10.2.4 npm? Oh, okay. All right, so let's get started. We're at this. We're gonna say install, and what this should do is, because there's no package.json file that existed, that should be got created for us along with a package lock file and a node modules directory. Node modules is a bunch of stuff you don't want to include. This particular git ignore that I have is optimized for Python, so it doesn't know about node modules. So we want to go into our git ignore and jump to the bottom and say JavaScript and say node modules. But this directory can get gigantic, so this is really important. Let's actually, even just installing that, I'm curious how much did that install? 16 megabytes of code just to install one developer tool. Pretty wild, and that's a light install. Okay, so now we've got our package.json here, and it has one dev dependency in it, just Tailwind. I'm going to assume for now that that's all we really need. Maybe it's been a while since, and I haven't been paying a lot of attention to this. Those are the stuff about post CSS and auto prefixer. Maybe those aren't actually needed anymore. Don't know. We'll need to explore. Okay, the other thing that we've got here is this Tailwind CSS init command, and I think this is going to generate that first config for us. So let's do that. And I'm sure it put that in the root directory, but I'm not going to want that to live in the root directory. That's the thing I want to change probably. I don't like having a ton of top-level files, and if I can avoid it, and the JavaScript ecosystem is particularly egregious about this. They have I think the average one that I see has maybe, well, who am I kidding? I've got way more here than I would like to confess. These things just stack up on you. So let's look at that Tailwind config and see what's there before we move it. So it's saying it's a pretty stock configuration right now. the thing that we want to do, so it says this, configure your template paths, and they're saying their example is they're looking for any HTML or JS files under a source directory. We can steal from the homeschool app, and that is the location that we want, is this. We've got our top level templates directory. Oh, boo. Get out of here. For some reason, iTerm doesn't like it when I copy paste sometimes. Or I think it fights with NeoVim. So let's do this and then paste that in here. So now we're saying that we will look for templates in this path. And this is important for Tailwind as an optimization. Tailwind works by adding a lot of CSS classes to your HTML tags. And for every tag that it finds, or for every CSS class that it finds, if that is a valid Tailwind class, it will keep that in the final output. But it will keep only that. And so if you can think of it as like Tailwind is attempting to make sure that there are as few CSS class definitions as possible because it has so many of them. There's a multiplicative effect for reasons we're not going to go into. So it's really important to be able to point to where are you actually using Tailwind so that Tailwind can optimize that stuff. So we've got that there. The reason that my Tailwind config over here is has so much colors and stuff in it is I opted to keep the color scheme from a previous version of Tailwind, and that's what this configuration was for. But since we're starting fresh here, I don't need to do that. We'll just use the default color scheme from the latest version of Tailwind, which will allow us to keep this configuration file nice and tight. Okay, but I ultimately don't want our Tailwind stuff and our CSS files to all live at the top level directory. I'm going to do the same thing I did with homeschool, and I'm going to make a directory that I call front end. Those are going to be the front end concerns of the application, and we'll move the Tailwind config into the front end directory. And this is also where we will put our CSS file that we want to use. So now we've got this front end directory and it's got that config that we just set up. Okay. Let's continue down here. So we need a starting file that they've called input CSS, and then they've got an output. They've got an output directory. So we can let's just copy this directly, and in our front end directory, I'll call it the same name, why not? Input CSS, and we'll paste in, these are Tailwind like import directives. We don't need to worry too much about them. They're just like necessary elements that are allowing Tailwind to pull in everything that it needs. Get rid of this. And let's bring up the package JSON again. And we're going to steal from the other package JSON down here. There's a couple of commands that I built in here, and you'll see them over here. So there's this npx tailwind command that's saying like, take this input file, make this output file, and start a watch process. Now we have two modes of this. We have one where we actually want to watch. That's going to be our development mode. And then we have one where we want to just build the output, which is why we have two targets here. So we're going to steal both of these things. And we need to put them, sorry, let's steal this whole scripts section. Whoops, come on. There we go. Okay. We've got a new scripts section. There's the dependencies. We will probably want to specify the node engine. We'll want to verify that. Like we're not running with node 18 here. We're going to be running with node 19. And I can't remember. I think either Heroku complained, something along the way said you don't have your engine specified, and that's like their version. I don't understand. I don't understand all the way their reasons for things. But now we've got these two things that, although we've got this is not site, this is input. That's going to be input, and then the output is to this static CSS directory. Did I have a, hold on. Yeah. All right. So it gets tricky thinking about what files are considered generated files versus not. And this output file that we're going to get from Tailwind, sorry, blanked, is going to be a generated file that we don't want to keep. So like I can actually illustrate this. Let's see. Will it show up at all? Yeah. So if we run npm run build. There we go. So our static directory suddenly appeared as like a directory that we want to keep. And the reason for that is the static file in here has got a site CSS in it. Let's actually take a look at what's in that content. So it's got some pre-work that's like essentially clearing all the styles that might be coming from the browser. So it has a base condition to start with, and it includes a bunch of this stuff. And we're in a development mode, so it's got all this white space. So it's very readable. It's got comments. The long-term output of this will be detected automatically by Heroku. Heroku populates a certain environment variable, and Tailwind will pay attention to that variable and will actually like generate a compressed version of the CSS file that has none of that white space to make it as tight as possible, because it's very important that your CSS be small, that be quick to download and very quick to parse, because it has to be there super early on a web page. So we've got that. That'll be good. And I think the other way we could have run that command, can we run npx build? Well, is that the same thing as, no. Okay. I don't know what I'm talking about. So I thought npx was a synonym for npm run, but I'm clearly wrong. So we have two modes here. There's the build and there's the watch. The build is just the generated version thing, but we want to be able to watch this, because when we are modifying our templates, we can tell, because the npm command is running and we've told the configuration to pay attention to certain directories, including the templates directory, anytime we modify the template and we save it, that a little watcher will be looking and saying, did you add a CSS attribute? Is there anything that we can track, that we can add, that we need to add to this build, to this generated CSS file, so that when you reload the site, it's automatically there? That's what's going on with the watch process. So to take advantage of that, we need to change the way that we do procfile stuff. And on the homeschool app, I couldn't find a clean way to separate this. So we have a procfile for the actual like deployed site, but what I ended up doing is a separate procfile for the local front end stuff. And we'll see how I modified the make file to use the other one. So we want this line here of procfile run. We want to come over to our area, and then I want to create a a procfile .dev and paste that output. And I need the other two things from the dev. We'll put them right there. All right. Now in our make file, we want to be able to specify which proc file that we're running. I'm kind of all over the place. I apologize if this is hard to follow. This will be all in one commit so that you can at least check it out later. We want to use the proc file dev. Now we're now in a position to take advantage of all this stuff. So let's watch what happens when I run make at this point. There's actually two things that will start up. So we have the actual gunicorn process that's still running on port 5001. But we also have this other watch command, which then runs Tailwind CSS. It's going to be paying attention to our input file. But really what it's paying attention to is it's watching that templates directory. And it's going to use that configuration file, and it's going to generate this CSS file anytime there's a change. And it's pretty quick. I don't remember if they wrote this in Rust or what they did. This is very speedy. In fact, that 103 milliseconds is probably the longest time we'll ever see if I made any modification. In fact, let's try it out. Let's see if we can trigger it. Let's go to that index, and we'll say class BG blue. So background color of blue. I don't know that actually is valid, but it was enough to trigger this, and this is telling me that actually we got that configuration right, because here it's saying, oh, I found it. I found that you did something, and I'm going to rebuild, and it took me 12 milliseconds to do that. It's pretty speedy. So certainly faster than I can process any visual change. So it's a fast enough flow. And if I save it again, it actually doesn't care about the content. It's going to be looking for any bytes in there. So it's any save of the templates will trigger a rebuild, whether or not it's actually a meaningful change, which is fine. So now we've got that running. We've got the new proc file here. Let's check out what we've got here. What I've kept around. We do want to add that git ignore. Let's do that. So we'll come back down here and we'll say we want to ignore, it was static site.css is the place that we don't want to pay attention to. And okay, so if we do another look at that, it no longer looks for the static directory. Okay, I think we're close. I think something that we can change here. So instead of, sorry, we just want to reference our own base CSS. That's the admin one, but our base CSS is going to be at the very base of the whole site, and it's going to be there because we're dumping. Sorry, not base, site CSS. We're dumping that information to static, and static doesn't have any subdirectories underneath it, so it's just going to be mixed into the root of the static file's output location. And a way that we can see that is we can run, like we still don't have the static files directory anymore. So if we run manage collect static, and it's going to take a second. There's a lot more to process there now because of white noise. So that was a lot slower, you might have noticed. And if we look at static files directory, what are we going to see? We don't see what I was hoping to see yet. And the reason why is this guy, enable static files dir. I knew that was going to bite me. Here it is. It just bit us. It's a quick change, but now we should have a file there regularly, and we can actually, it's a generated file in the git ignore, so we might want to add a little .keep file just to ensure that the static file directory is going to be there so we don't get any warnings in any particular place. So let's go to the settings file and static and uncomment this. And now I'm going to rerun the collect static command, and we should see a difference. The difference is, well, first it's going to prompt us to delete this stuff. And so it's going to delete the directory and then rerun the output. And then now if we do a listing on that static files, now we see what I was hoping to see. So we see the site CSS. Here's the original. That gets dumped here by the collect static command. And then I guess then what happens, this is interesting. I hadn't realized that it would generate this many files, but this is fascinating. So then what happens is it generates the Brotli version, so that's the .br, and the gzip version, that's the .gz. And then the fingerprinting process kicks in, and so then it creates this identifier. And since it's all the same number, it must not be on the compressed files. It must be on the actual original site CSS file. So it's created copies. So I would guess that if we did like a diff between this file and this file, they're going to be the same. And similarly with the gzip files and the just CSS files. So that's why we do that. So John, we didn't have to add site CSS to the static files directly because that just gets brought up in the collect static flow. That's the key thing that, and I thank you for bringing that up. That's the key takeaway of this configuration is like it's sort of subtle. I had to say that the way I wired this together is the package JSON, which I don't have in source control yet, so I can't find it quickly. This build command, it dumps its output to that static directory. So input starts with input.css. The output is static.site/site.css, and collect static uses that static directory as an input directory into the process, and it eventually dumps it into static files as the output directory. That's the chain there. It's pretty easy thing to miss about how this is actually all wired together in the end. Okay, so I think we finally have the full process here, and let's go ahead and add one more thing to make sure that we keep the static directory. I'm just going to create a little file called .keep. We can delete this once we have some other like logos and things like that, but since the site.css that's here is a generated file, we don't actually want to save that, but we do want to persist the directory, and Git doesn't like holding empty directories, so that's what it's doing there. Okay, so I think we're ready to stage all this stuff and check it out and make sure that we have the full configuration of everything that's needed here. And we've got the things that we want to ignore that are JavaScript related. We've updated our proc file to have a developer version that will run our watcher command. And so we've got that new proc file. We've got the base Tailwind thing that we can use, and we've got the Tailwind configuration that is just looking at the templates directory. So that's cool. We didn't add, so we've got the package lock, which is going to be this monster file, no doubt. Gosh, it's going to go on forever. How do we get to, okay, I think we can get past this. Package JSON. All right. I'm sure that package lock file is just 99% of the content of this diff. So we've got our scripts commands that are there. The scripts is something that the npm world will run. If you do npm run, it will look for whatever targets you define here. So npm run build, npm run watch are the things that are part of that. I don't think that we're going to have to specify any build target. I think that's part of the standard Heroku JavaScript build pack, which we need to add. We added our static files directory so that it actually found our site CSS file, and then we changed from the base CSS that we were testing to the site CSS that's going to be the real CSS for the site. Okay, so a couple more changes, and then we'll wrap it up and deploy, and we'll find out if the engine is going to be required or not. We need to add a Heroku build pack, and I always forget how to do this because I do it basically never. So we're going to do Heroku, it's probably build pack or build packs.help. Yeah. but it's how do you set the inserting? Okay, we want to add a build pack, but we need the position to be in a certain order. So let's first do Heroku build packs and see if it lists out the one that we have. It should just say, yeah, Heroku Python. So we need to add, well, I don't actually know it. I assume it's Heroku Node.js or something, but Heroku Node.js build pack. There's got to be an official one. Officially supported. Yeah, here it is. Heroku Node.js. Can we do the, tell us how to add it quickly? Heroku build packs. Yeah. Come on. It might be Hi Factor, welcome. This might be where that engine stuff comes into play, where Heroku is going to make you specify an engine. But I want to set a build pack in a certain position. Let's just poke with it. Heroku build packs. Is it set? That needs is the one we want? So we've got the app. So I think it's going to be a one-based index. So I think to get this right in the order that we want, I think it's going to look like this. Heroku build packs. And then the app is Journey Inbox. That's the name. I was able to pre-select a name that was memorable because I created it through the dashboard, so I don't have to remember something wacky like I have to do at homeschool. And the index is going to be 1. And oh, but the build, we got to put the build pack here first. So this should be Heroku Node.js. Non-existent flag. What? Oh. Need to do set. Wrong command. Build pack set. So now if we run Heroku build packs, we should see both of them in the sequence that we want. No, boo. We just lost the Python build pack. That's stupid. All right, fine. Heroku build packs, add Heroku Python. I guess since we're putting add here, hopefully it'll come after. All right. It's not the not the journey that I wanted to do to get there, but it's looking like the right answer. Let's just do one more confirmation. All right, we've got the 2 in sequence. And I think we've got everything we need to get this party started. So let's do this. Let's so add Tailwind CSS. This fixes, not only does it fix the Tailwind one, but it fixes that other issue that fixes 52. That was like the placeholder. It fixes that, and it fixes 14. And I guess I should check if the tests are still running before I push this out. Yep, that seems to be happy still. How much you want to bet I broke CI somehow? Let's try and push it up. Let's watch CI, make sure CI is passing before we actually deploy. I don't think there's anything risky about the change, but it'll be a good thing to check. So this will refresh. It should kill off 52. Yeah, 52's gone. So is the 14. And we can go actions and let that run. I think while I'm here, I don't think I need discussions. Oh, okay. I guess I'd already turned discussions off. All right, never mind. Hoping that that tab would go away, but it's probably saying like use discussions. Yeah, okay. Not now. Get out of here. Thank you. Go back to actions. All right. Seemed like it ran okay. Check the run. Nothing to see. I mean, I could expand stuff, but who cares? Thanks, Factor. Appreciate the subscription. All right, so time to do the deploy. Moment of truth. I predict this will fail. I think it's going to fail because of the engine stuff. But let's find out. And then we'll read the log. So we want to see, what are we after here? We want to see, hold on. Okay. Let's check this. So we've got, we've got the stack we want. We've got the 2 build packs. It says a Node.js app is detected. That's because we have that package JSON. If it didn't have that, it would have failed. Got a runtime environment. This is the important environment variable that Tailwind is going to pay attention to. So because this is set to production, it's going to cause the build tool to run in a different mode. Now, this is something that we should probably correct, where it says engine is unspecified. And maybe it's going to give us a warning somewhere. Maybe not. Maybe we're okay to live without it. And then just let it default to the latest. And I'd be happy with that, actually, because it would be one less thing to have to keep up with. So it installs dependencies. Whoops. I'll get out of here. It's already done. That's cool. There's very little Python stuff to do. So it installed the dependencies and gives you the guilt warning about you should be all funding these open source projects. With what money? And it ran the build and did this command. So because the command was build, that's the stable thing. That's the thing that we had to hook into. It doesn't know about the watch command, but it does expect that there's a build command, and it will do that if it's there. So it ran our build and generated that site CSS file in the right place. Okay. So then caches dependencies and does some stuff. And we get our build succeeded message. Then there's like a handoff. Now we're to the next build pack. And the build process has left the file system in its current state. So we now have a static directory with a site CSS file in it. It goes along here and says, hey, there are no changes to the actual Python dependencies, so there's nothing to do here. That's pretty quick. And then we get here, importantly. Now, pay attention to the number. Last couple times we've been running this, it was 130, if you recall. So 131 tells us that we pulled in that extra site CSS file. Does the final release stuff and is all out there. All right, cool. I think what this will let us do now is go back to Journey Inbox, bring up this again, and we should be able to say Journey Inbox. And we still don't have a favicon. That's fine. But here we are. We've got our site CSS file. It's fingerprinted, which is what we want. And let's check it out. Let's see what we can see. This is the test I want to do to make sure that the node environment thing was respected. I don't have any reason to believe it won't be. But if we look at the response, oh, bummer. This is not what I was hoping to see. I was hoping all this stuff would be gone. So, what's the deal, yo? All right, something to correct because that should not have been there. So there's an optimization step that we need that was seemingly ignored, and I don't know why. Let's go explore that from the documentation, and I think that'll be a good place to wrap it up this evening. We've done quite a bit, but it'd be good to see that. Optimizing for production. It's almost like they read our minds of what we need. Let's keep going though. Let's click through a bunch of like. There's probably a reason why it has this order. So let's do that. We've got our style sheet output thing, so we know that it works, and I don't need to read about the actual usage of this. I'm more interested in this getting started guide. I'm not going to do editor setup. That's NeoVim stuff for me. I'm sure there's some plugin that we could install, but I think we're okay. Preprocessors. Okay. I always get confused about whether or not this applies, because something about this I just find puzzling. A guide to using Tailwind with common CSS preprocessors like SaaS, less, and stylus. Since Tailwind is a post CSS plugin, there's nothing stopping you from using it with SaaS, less, or stylus. It is important to note that you don't need to use a preprocessor with Tailwind. Typically write very little CSS. All right. This is maybe the signal that I think I got rid of this stuff a while ago. Like I used to have a post CSS file, configuration file, and had to deal with this, and I imported it. This is why you see some of the stuff that's in here, but I don't think we need it. In fact, I'm going to assume we don't. So they've got information using that with post CSS, with SaaS, and less. In the days of yore, those were tools that you needed to reach for more often. CSS has gotten a lot more powerful in the interim. Okay. Okay. Tailwind CSS is incredibly performance focused and aims to produce the smallest CSS file possible by only generating the CSS you're actually using in your project. Combined with minification, that's the thing, that the step we need. Network compression, that's the Brotli gzip stuff that we get from white noise. This usually leads to CSS files that are less than 10 kilobytes. Like, let's look at ours. It's still small. We've already got it down to, it's only 10 kilobytes in size. But if we can get rid of these comments along here, I mean, this thing would be 1 kilobyte right now. Like, it literally has no rules that we care about. It's just resetting everything. So it should be as small as, like, we're talking about the baseline condition for Tailwind, and it's not there yet. So let's continue on. All right, so with CSS, files is small, you don't have to worry about complex situation, blah, blah, blah. For the smallest possible production build, we recommend minifying your CSS with a tool like CSS Nano and compressing it with Brotli. Okay. If you're using Tailwind CLI, which I am, you can minify your CSS using the minify flag. Okay, does that use CSS Nano by default? If you installed Tailwind as a post CSS plugin, which I have not. Okay, so maybe we're just missing the minify flag, which we can get with our build. Like, most of the time we're going to have watch, which is not going to minify. That's what we want. But the package JSON, let's come in here and add minify to this. And just to verify, let's confirm that static. This should look like with all the comments and stuff. And now if we run npm run build, we've specified with minify, and if we look at the less output, much tighter. Much tighter. DUSH on that file is like, it's so small it's showing up as 4 kilobytes, which is like, think about as small as Mac usually likes to specify as its like minimum file size, basically. So I think that was the change we needed. So let's do this. Make sure CSS is minified. And let's push that up, but also let's start a deploy process here. Now, this time through, we have an npm cache We didn't change anything. Well, we changed something about package.json, so it might try and reinstall anyway. So it's not a good... Oh, it restored. All right, cool, cool. Wow, that's so fast. Nice, I like it. It's already done with the Node side of this. And so this is actually gonna be a good illustration too of fingerprinting. So we are talking now about a situation where the fingerprint's gonna be different. So we have 900F, but because there are fewer bytes because of the minified file, it's going to have a different fingerprint for what it produces. So when we refresh the page after this is deployed, we're going to see likely a different site CSS there, and we can check out the response, and we should see it a lot smaller. So pay attention to these numbers, although I'm not going to I'm not going to clear the content, so we should also have the old numbers with us too. So that's useful. Let's try a refresh. And here we go. Oh yeah, look at that. So that is tight. Site CSS is, I mean, compression's amazing. Check this out. This is fascinating to me. Is that yes, we minified, but because of the compression, we actually didn't gain as much as we might have. Like, look at the uncompressed. The uncompressed went from 10.2 down to 3.5 kilobytes. That's great. That's a reduction in what, 7 kilobytes basically. But because compression is so magical, the difference between what was actually transferred over the wire is not as significant as that 7 kilobytes. It was only, what is that, like 1.4 kilobytes of difference? Now, both are, that's crazy fast in terms, or crazy small in terms of size, and it's going to give you about the optimal experience. But we can click this one now, and now we can see that the response, we lost all those comments, all that white space. And this has that advantage that now when the browser engine loads up this file, there are, I mean, I'm sure it can chew through white space and those things quickly, but every little bit helps. And this leads to things like time to paint, which is a concept of how quickly can we know what your styles are supposed to be. And then once we parsed your HTML, we're applying all the styles, and how quickly do you see a response? So having a minimal CSS file is pretty important. So I think that leads us to kind of the end of where we need to be for this evening.